Saygıdeğer
Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, welcome to the award ceremony of the 14th International Congress on Psychopharmacology and International Symposium on Child and Adolescent Psychopharmacology. The best research presentation awards now will be distributed. The best research presentation, third place, will be presented by Professor Engesho.
kazananı açıklıyorum.
And the winner for the third runner-up would be Borthoxetin improved autistic-like behaviors in autistic in rats. Would like to give the floor to Dr. Mehmet Bozkurt to receive the award.
Sizi böyle alalım Mehmet Bey sununuz için.
Araştırma görevlisi Mehmet Bozkurt.
My name is Mehmet Bozkurt, and our paper presented during the Congress is an autism model. The aim of the study was to investigate the effects of vortioxetine on autism-like behaviors in a prenatal valproic acid-induced autism model. As you know, autism is a neurodevelopmental disease, and there are two molecules that we're using in treatment. Essentially, both are atypical antipsychotics. Therefore, autism is still a field that we need a new treatment modality. Vortioxetine has just appeared as an option. Actually, vortioxetine is an antidepressant molecule. Serotonin reuptake transport is inhibited by the 5-HT1A agonist, 5-HT1B partial agonist, and it has an antagonist for 5-HT1D. Actually, we've also reviewed all the previous studies indicating that vortioxetine in neurodegenerative diseases, particularly in terms of impairment in social interaction. Based on this understanding, we've designed an experiment. This is the experiment design. You can see that the first day is the embryonic day 0, where the rats mated. In 24 hours, in the female rats, vaginal smear test was run so as to accept the animals with vaginal plaque as pregnant. Through the mid of the 12th day, 500 milligram per kilogram of valproxen was injected. After delivery, as of the 42nd day, throughout 28 days, vortioxetine injection was performed in 3 different doses as 2.5, 5, and 10 milligram per kilogram. As a result of the treatment in the last week, some behavioral tests were run, locomotor activity test and repeated novel object recognition test was also performed. Also, to check for the social interaction and social preferences, three-chamber social interaction test. Also, spatial learning was checked by Y-May test, and pre-pulse inhibition test also were run. Following the behavioral tests, we've sacrificed the animals and isolated brain tissue. As for the results, we can see especially in the new items recognition test, valproic acid impaired the control group, but whereas vortioxetine 5 and 10 groups had a positive feedback. In terms of sociability text, valproic acid led to a significant decline, whereas the vortioxetine group was reverse. In terms of social interactions, there was, and in the preferences, vortioxetine 5 and 10 reversed the situation. In terms of the sensory motor test, valproic acid impaired the sensory motor gating functions, but vortioxetine also made the situation better. In terms of locomotor activity test, I think this is the most important one because the repetitive behaviors were detected by the self-grooming. And here, valproic acid versus control group increased the repetitive actions, whereas vortioxetine 5 and 10 reversed the situation. In conclusion, we can say that our results showed that VPA administration mimicked the behavioral aspects of autism-like actions in rats. Vortioxetine improved the autistic-like behaviors in the VPA model in rats. As a result of the study, we think that vortioxetine will provide a therapeutic effect on autism with its multimodal mechanism of action, but we need to validate our study in different models of autism and elucidate possible mechanisms underlying the effects of vortioxetine. Thank you very much. Second prize will be the next, and would like to invite Professor Feyza Arıcıoğlu to the stage to present the second prize.
Kazananı açıklıyorum.
And the winner, investigating the role of PI3K, AKT, mTOR signaling pathway and effect of agmetin in experimental autism model in rats, I would like to invite Dr. Gözde Kabacıoğlu to the floor to receive the prize and to make the presentation. Hello, my name is Gözde Kabacıoğlu, Department of Pharmacology in Marmara University. This was my graduation project. We used autism spectrum disorder model to check for the PIK3 AKT mTOR signaling pathway and the possible effects of agmetin, known to be involved in the regulation of many functions. There are many receptors that it's binding to, so we wanted to check the effect of agmetin in autism, both in terms of molecular biology and behaviors. We ran a 4-week Spegri-Dolly female rat test. There are 3 groups: control ASD 400 milligrams, and AST plus AGM. 400 milligrams of valproic acid was used to trigger autism, and we continue it for 15 days. On the 46th postnatal day, we completed behavior test, and on the 56th day, decapitated to perform the molecular analysis. Open field test for locomotor activity was used and to evaluate the stereotypical behaviors, also for visual memory and cognitive rigidity. We also included recognition and differentiation indices. Social interaction test was used for social withdrawal, three-chamber test for sociability preference index. Molecular indices were also evaluated with mRNA expressions. This part I'd like to skip, statistical analysis, because you will be able to see the analysis on our slides. Open field test. You can see we have left the animals into a platform with 16 equal squares. In the autism, as indicated in the literature, in autism cases, there is an increased activity reported also in the rats. And in our study, in the autism group, the total activity tended to increase in compliance with the literature. Also, grooming behavior was considered as a parameter of the stereotypic behaviors in lab animals. Also, in our autism group, the rats presented an increase in this grooming behavior, as we can indicate as a criterion for stereotypic behaviors. Also, augmentin treatments reduced the repetitive behaviors. Our study provided the specific finding because I can say that with reference to the augmentin treatment, we couldn't find any study in the literature in this respect. Novel object recognition test, we first left the animals with two identical objects and observed their relation with the objects, and then changed one of the objects, introduced a new one. The new and the older object experiences and the time they are spent with the objects were observed. We checked whether there is a visual learning memory, whether there was a cognitive rigidity present. Also, in the control group, we were expecting that the animals would be more interested in the novel object. Therefore, the animals in the control group showed this behavior. However, the ones in the autism group could not differentiate novel and the old objects, where they had an equal interest in both of the objects. After the augmentin therapy, the rats had spent more time with the new object. Therefore, in terms of the novel object recognition test and index, this difference was also visible. Augmentin treatment can be considered to improve visual learning and memory. Also, our study is a sophisticated one, as there is no other study in the literature showing that. A social interaction test provides leaving the animal within the same environment with another rat that they didn't know before, and smelling, climbing, or sniffing behaviors were considered to be social interaction, and avoidance time was significantly higher in the autism group. As we know from the literature, there is limitation of social interaction, which also corroborated with the literature, because the rats with autism provided less socialization, but with augmentin treatment, sociability improved. Also, the social interaction test was not present in relation to augmentin in the literature, and also in the autism group, avoidance increased, but in the augmentin group, we had less avoidance behaviors. Three-chamber test was also run on three-chamber platforms, where we first leave the animals to a platform. They spend some time there. Afterwards, one of the chambers were also introduced another rat they didn't come across previously. and then we check whether they were more interested in the chamber or the rat. And in the second stage, an unknown animal was introduced in the second room, and we try to understand whether they are spending more time with the first or the second animal. We consider this as a preference for social interaction. In the animals with autism, social interaction and preference tests were lower. But with augmentin treatment, there was an improvement. In the literature, there is only one study to look into the three-chamber test and social interaction as a result of augmentin. So the results corroborated each other. PI3K, actinase, and mTOR were found significantly increase in the ASD group with an activation increase. And the same results were also obtained in gene expression of our study. Augmentin, at the same time, is an NMDA receptor antagonist. Therefore, it is activated together with an NMDA receptor. When augmentin therapy was delivered, after the treatment, the expression of the molecules tended to decline. In conclusion, as a result of the findings of our study, we can say that there is only one study that was run with augmentin in the literature. Beyond that, the effect of augmentin on autism was studied in a clinical trial. This study looked into the plasmas and the augmentin levels of the autism patients and compared it to healthy controls, and they were found to be significantly lower. And in our study, endogenous augmentin was delivered externally, or augmentin synthesized or metabolized. We checked whether, together with another molecule, whether it would have a light in the treatment of autism. Also, we decided that this path may have an important role in our treatments. Thank you.
Birincilik ödülüyle
The first prize now will be introduced by Professor Shimin Lee.
kazananı açıklıyor.
And the winner is Aslıhan Uyar Demir, altered prediction error in temporoparietal junction of depressed patients during social interaction. Dr. Demir, you're kindly invited to the stage, please. Professors, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, good evening. My name is Aslıhan Uyar Demir. As Socket Lab, we've performed a social interaction experiment and checked for the alterations in abnormal prediction error in the TPJ of depressed patients. I'm extremely excited and would like to apologize at the outset for any kind of errors I would be making in this presentation. During the neuroimaging modalities and experiments, rather than single brain zones, we wanted to take a look at the interacted brain zones where they are working in correlation with each other. So the networks are of our interest. We have now more data in the literature on this aspect as well. To look at the network pathologies in depression, default mode network is mostly studied, and in this network, internodal interaction tends to increase, where in terms of the non-limitation of this interaction, we have accumulated literature. Actually, negative self, negative future consideration, and rumination are all associated. And also about the Thales network and dorsal partial network, some pathologies are indicated. Actually, although network pathologies are indicated one by one, about cognitive flexibility, we know that network switching plays a role. And about depression, we want to look into the literature and see if there is any pathology that is consistent, but we couldn't. And when we look at the literature, we understand that particularly task negative and task positive networks switching is mostly based on prediction error. It's really a very important factor that just strikes our attention. Prediction error, in briefly, plays a role in social cognition and producing signals in a broader area. The internal representations based on our previous experiment also can be compared versus the personal stimuli. In other words, we understand that it undertakes the task of predictive brain. When there is some kind of abnormality, there is a prediction error that would come up. In the depression, we wanted to check if prediction error was checked or not. Firstly, there are two groups of PE. Unsignaled and signaled PE are the two groups, and underneath them there are many PE types present. Also, PE about reward expectation, motivational error, or social error predictions. These are all present. About prediction error in depression, these are all about expectation of reward. As expected, in the ventral stratum, it's quite dominant, and in the basal ganglion, there are some pathologies detected. Nevertheless, we are rather curious about non-limitability of this network, why the dorsal attention network is not sufficiently active. So we wanted to check if the predicted error signaling might be at default and at some problems. So this was the initial reason why we looked into this study. So in other words, a social prediction error was the topic of our study. In healthy controls, we ran a social support project, as announced. Their social prediction error, particularly in the right temporoparietal junction, there is an involvement. Based on this, we just wondered whether the brain networks can also be considered as a role of TPJ in the switcher between brain networks. So we started a literature research, and we've realized that it was not studied in depression. So based on what I've just explained, we wanted to make a social cognition experiment on the brain. So we looked into the default mode network activation, problems of limitation, what the result or the reason would be. Prediction error in the TPJ may be a cause for that, as we've wanted to look into. Well, to test this hypothesis, we wanted to plan a task. This was quite like the trust game. 3 phases. 60 trials planned. In the first phase, if the participant wanted to share 80%, there would be a trustful environment, so the feedback was according to that. In the second phase, it got down to 50%. In the third phase, got up to 80%. So why did we schedule the play to create a social prediction error? On the right side, you can see how the system runs, and I'm not going to get into the details for the sake of time, but there are 60 trials of tasks. Every trial lasts for 7 seconds. DSM-5 criteria were considered, and those who presented with major depression, schizophrenia, and bipolar disorder in the first-degree relatives. Any additional psychiatric disease was also questioned. Alcohol or substance abuse was also questioned. SCID's interview was run, and we paid attention to the fact that there was no extra psychiatric disease present. Also, both age and gender matched control group was identified. And the only thing I can say as a note, one of the exclusion criteria was the degree of any kind of disease that required admittance to the intensive care unit. Also, we wanted to include patients not in the dysregulation phase. The reason is Smallwood and colleagues emphasized this aspect, particularly after COVID in their studies. Default mode network and hypoxin effect was indicated in the literature from their studies. So then, again, the prediction error value was taken as a computational formula. Gate theory is based in this mathematical modeling. In this mathematical modeling, we based ourselves to predictive coding. The reason for that is it tests our hypothesis quite well. And in the past, we had some sound evidence about it. High cognitive functions were used in reinforcement learning parameters, and we wanted to add these parameters. Prediction error data was also used in UVR minus U actual per minute, calculated on RMCA meter. What really mattered was for every participant, trial by trial, and cumulative prediction errors were calculated. In the initial results, firstly, you can see a mathematical model. 29 MD and 29 controls were included in the analysis. RMCA values, prediction error was quite successful, as you can see on the graph to the right. Okay, I will be quick. To the left side, you can see the learning parameters, control group and the depression group, quite different from each other. Also, data analysis, MATLAB, and in the prediction error values were taken as regression. Angular gyrus also was included in the MDD group for activation, and in the control group, a supramarginal activation was present. In the second tier analysis, all groups were checked and their differences were controlled. In the angular gyrus and in the posterior TPJ, there was a significant activation difference. As for the results, here you can see especially functional connectivity and ICA were taken in terms of the assessment. Angular gyrus default mode network were also considered. Healthy controls presented. Supramarginal gyrus in the healthy controls was also included in the other networks. Briefly, As responsible for the social cognition, we think that default mode network activation can have a role in the depressive patients. And the study underscores the critical role of that. Clinically speaking, we now understand that personalized medicine is extremely important today. As in other disciplines in psychiatry, personalized treatments should be considered on the network. So we should know which treatment modality these individuals would be responding to better. So 30% of a response to any kind of antidepressant therapy, and we need to consider lack of response. Therefore, TMS or other kinds of treatments are to be considered as an important attempt, so it can be identified as a target. But there is still a long way to go, I know, and we need different analysis and we need a more integrated approach. I'm sorry for taking your time so long. Thank you.
Sorusu olan varsa alabilirim ama.
If there's any question.
Tamam.
Okay, thank you.
Değerli hocalarımızı
I would like to thank the audience, the speakers. Today, it's the birthday of Professor Xin-Ming Li. I would like to invite you, sir, back to stage, please. And this will be the end of the award ceremony.
tüm hocalarımızı davet edebiliriz.
It's a surprise, but not surprise. I sensed yesterday. I would like to thank everybody, especially Masood and also my friend Andy Crenshaw to orchestrate this special event. I'm only 85 years old, so I have many days to come. And hopefully people can share the cake and the happiness with us. And I said in the beginning of the meeting, and Masood organized wonderful weather and water in the Mediterranean Sea. Right now we have a wonderful touch-up for my trip today. And so see you next year. And thank you so much, everybody. Oh, not